So the Residential Tenancies Act is a piece of legislation in Ontario that governs the majority of tenancies in Ontario. There's a good possibility that if you're renting out an apartment here in Ontario, Canada, that your tenancy is going to be covered by the Residential Tenancies Act, and it gives you specific rights and responsibilities as a tenant and also rights and responsibilities as a landlord as well. Provides you with rules for increasing your rent and for evicting tenants, rules around maintenance, peaceful living in your unit. And it also creates a body called the Landlord and Tenant Board, which is a quasi-judicial body that deals with disputes between landlords and tenants.
We'll chat about whether, you said that you're likely covered by it.
Likely covered by it,
So
yeah.
let's say, for example, I live in a house with my landlord and I share a kitchen with them, I maybe share a bathroom with them. Does that act apply to me?
No, so the Residential Tenancies Act doesn't apply to you if you're living in a situation where you're required to share a kitchen or a bathroom with your landlord's children, or your landlord's spouse, so their husband or wife.
All right, so subletting.
Yes.
This is really important. Students typically will sublet a unit, and Jornano, he can tell us exactly what
Yeah.
sublet means.
Yeah, so when you're renting out an apartment here, you'll hear two different terms when it comes to kind of giving your tenancy to somebody. You'll come across subletting or assigning your tenancy. So with subletting, you're essentially renting out your unit, your bedroom, whatever the case may be that you're living in, to another person who, like, for a temporary period of time. So for a few months, while you're back in your home country, you're on a co-op work period in another city, and you need to live somewhere else. With subletting, you're letting somebody live in your space. But you're still ultimately responsible for everything that happens with the unit. So you're responsible for their conduct, which can cause some problems sometimes. So any tenant covered by the Residential Tenancies Act has the right to assign or sublet their rental unit as long as they get their landlord's consent. And then an assignment, conversely, you're essentially signing over your lease agreement to another tenant. So you basically take yourself out of the equation at that point. You're no longer responsible after the tenancy has been assigned to this other person.
Amazing. So essentially the difference between assignment and subletting is that if you're subletting, you're planning on coming back.
Yeah.
Assignment, you're no longer on the lease.
Yes.
essentially.
Yeah.
Oh,
So it all
Great.
depends on your circumstances and what you're choosing to do with the unit, whether you're wanting to come back
Yeah.
or if you're just wanting to wipe your hands clean of any situation you may be in.
Great. So if you're a subtenant, you're someone who rents a room from the tenant.
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to talk a little bit about, being a subtenant? What can you expect?
Yeah, so being a subtenant is not a whole lot different from being a regular tenant.
Yeah.
The difference being there's that go-between person between you as the subtenant and the landlord. If you're having maintenance issues, standard how you should be reporting them is to the tenant, and then the tenant's supposed to report them to the landlord. A lot of people will have some sort of arrangement with their landlord that if their subtenant's having a problem, then their subtenant can contact the landlord directly, but they should be making those arrangements way in advance with the landlord if that's what they're choosing to do. And same with paying the rent.
Yes.
If you are subleasing from somebody, generally you pay your rent to the person you're subleasing from, like to the tenant, and then the tenant is responsible for paying the landlord. But again, you can always make arrangements for you as the subtenant to pay to the landlord as well.
Amazing. And we want to try to avoid paying in cash because cash can't be tracked.
Yes. Yeah.
You can get a check here as a student. So when you come to Canada, you can open a bank account, you can have a checking account, you can ask for checks. Those things can definitely be done. So I wouldn't be too concerned about not having a mode outside of cash. There's also e-transfers. How do you feel about that? Yeah,
E-transfers, checks,
Yeah.
direct deposits, money orders.
Yeah, they can be tracked.
Cash is kind of one of those last resort things that I tell people you can use, but if you're paying cash, make sure you get a receipt from the person.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes, a receipt. That's
Yes.
very helpful. So we're moving on to tenancy rights. So your rights as a tenant, as somebody who rents a unit, a room, a space from a landlord. And there are a number of different rights. We can't possibly cover them all today.
No, unless you want to just like itemize off the whole Residential Tenancies Act, we can cover the basics.
We'll cover
though.
the basics, some of the things that we found are that come up fairly often, and we'll go through it now.
Yeah. So if you're in a unit that's covered by the Residential Tenancies Act, I just kind of have to make that little distinguished part there.
Yes.
What you'll find is students, it's common across any general student, international students, whomever, even just people living in Ontario, your landlord will sometimes come to you and say, I want you out by the end of the week, I want you out by the end of the day, end of the month, without giving you any type of notice or reason for why they want you to do it. It's not legal notice to actually pursue eviction from your unit. So you have the right to stay in your unit unless there's a legal order from the landlord and tenant board for your eviction that's being enforced by the sheriff's office.
Your security of tenancy is pretty strong under the Residential Tenancies Act, right?
Yeah, so there's very specific reasonings about how and why your landlord can evict you, whether that's for non-payment of rent, causing problems in the unit for other tenants, conducting illegal businesses in the unit, a number of different reasons.
Exactly. So, which brings us to our next poll question. It's kind of on the opposite coin. So, if we're saying that a landlord cannot easily just kick you out, which is great for you, how about this question? So, true or false? If I want to, as a renter, I can move out at any time without any consequence. So, do you think that's true, or do you think that's false?
So the answer is false, which about 90% of you said was false. Most tenancies are for a fixed term, so generally for about 12 months or 1 year. If you have a fixed term tenancy like that, you can give notice to terminate your tenancy, but the date of termination of your tenancy has to be the last day of the tenancy itself. So if your lease starts September the 1st, 2020, for example, and goes until the end of August 2021, the date of termination of your lease would be that last day of August 2021. But you have to give at least 60 days written notice to terminate your tenancy if it's for a fixed term. After that initial period of your lease agreement, you move into what we call a month-to-month tenant. Or if you're just living in a place without a fixed term tenancy, which does happen a lot of times as well, you can give, again, 60 days written notice to move out of your unit as well, but that 60th day has to be the end of a rental period, which is generally the end of a month. What can I say about privacy? So your landlord has the duty to not interfere with your reasonable enjoyment of living in your unit, which means they can't come into your unit whenever they want to. Generally speaking, they have to give you 24 hours written notice to come into your unit, whether that's through text message, through email, posting a letter on your door, for example. Any of those are acceptable methods of giving notice to you to come into your unit. And that's if they want to come in and do an inspection, or if they want to come in and do repair work, put in any reason. Generally speaking, they have to give you 24 hours written notice. Unless there's an emergency situation in your unit, like fire, flood, medical emergency, whatever you might define as an emergency. If there's part of your lease that says your landlord's coming in to clean your unit, they don't have to give notice for that either, but they can only come in during certain hours of the day. And if you've given notice to terminate your tenancy, and they're showing the unit to prospective tenants or somebody else who wants to rent out the unit, they don't have to give you 24 hours notice, but they have to make a reasonable effort to let you know that they're planning to come to show the unit to somebody else.
Yes. So be rest assured that privacy is covered in the Residential Tenancy Act, and under the circumstances that Giordano said is how the landlord can come in, right? So Don't
Yeah.
expect that they're able to just,
Yeah.
I own the house, I can come in
Yeah.
at any time I want to. That's not really how it works.
Yeah. They can also, knock on the door, and if you give them permission to come
Yeah.
in, that's perfectly okay too. But generally speaking, 24 hours written notice is what you're looking for.